I'm Cortney. We're a family of 5 trying to grow as much of our own food as we can, and we raise chickens. Our kids wanted to name our little backyard farm, so we did. It's called Heart Pine Farms. It's July, and it's about 90 degrees outside. We just had a little welcome rain shower. We only had a couple hundredths of an inch of rain, and it's back to being hot and steamy again. Check out this tomato. It's rotting from the bottom up. And it's actually something that's very common while growing tomatoes. It's called blossom end rot. So surprisingly, blossom end rot isn't actually a tomato disease. It's a physiological disorder where the tissue on the blossom end of the tomato breaks down and starts to rot because of lack of calcium in the fruit. We've never had an emergency solution that we've tried with success for a quick fix when blossom end rot is happening, but there are a few things we do when we grow tomatoes that collectively work to keep the plants healthy and allow us to have decent harvests. There are a couple things we do that are especially important to help with the blossom end rot problem. So let's walk through our tomato plant setup so we can show you what we've been doing. We have 9 beds of tomatoes, including 5 Roma paste beds, 2 Skyway beds, a San Marzano bed, and a Supernova bed. We've been growing tomatoes here in zone 7B for 9 years now, so over time we've pretty much figured out which varieties work well for our area. For example, Skyways right here do really well in the hot and humid southeast. We grow Skyways for slicing, and also we add them to our Roma sauce when we make sauce because the Skyways add extra sweetness and tartness that we like. We grow Romas for canning sauce and salsa, and then the Supernovas we eat on salads, and we make our own homemade wood-fired pizzas and kebabs, and they're delicious on those. Skyway plants are semi-determinate, which means they act like indeterminate plants, but they look bushier like determinate ones. Romas are determinate, and San Marzano and Supernova tomatoes are indeterminate. Indeterminate plants, like this Supernova plant, get really big, and they produce tomatoes all along the stems like this, pretty much all season long. Determinate plants, like this Roma plant right here, they produce tomatoes at the ends of the stems, and they're mostly ready all at once. That's why they're really good for canning sauce. So tomato plants, they're really prone to disease, and there are some things that we do here to help avoid that. We rotate our crops, so we don't plant tomatoes or plants from the same family in the same beds year after year. Ideally, we'd skip 3 or 4 years, but we don't have the space, so it's more like 2 years. We also keep the soil in our beds really healthy. We plant winter cover crops, and we also add compost when we plant. We also add a really healthy layer of mulch on top of the beds when we plant. We use pine straw here. We use drip irrigation via emitters like this one right here to provide steady water at the base of the plant. This helps us water more consistently and avoid splashing water and soil on the leaves of the plant, which can contribute to disease. So we just have these emitter hoses right here attached to the tops of our tomato cages, and they go all the way down to the end, and they attach to a hose right there. And then the emitters drop right down like this, and they go right down to the base of the plant, right there. We try to prune diseased looking stems off when we first notice them, like that yellowing leaf right there. We remove that whole entire stem. So aside from that, we just do one good pruning when the plants first really start to take off after we plant them. And we prune the lower branches that touch the soil. Aside from that, we just don't have time to prune a lot because we're so busy. So we just let the plants grow. are things that are out of our control, like the weather. It got really hot and dry suddenly at the beginning of our summer, and then we were dumped on by rain, then back to hot and dry, and then humid. We had to remove one of our supernova plants because it looked wilted and diseased, but the rest of the plants have done just fine, thankfully. Almost every year, one of the things that we deal with is blossom end rot. Here are some green tomatoes on the plant that are affected by blossom end rot. You'll notice that it starts out as a little dark spot on the bottom, and then it just gradually gets bigger and spreads until the whole entire tomato rots. Blossom end rot more commonly affects determinate tomato varieties rather than indeterminate varieties. This is an indeterminate variety. These are supernova tomatoes, and all of the tomatoes on this plant are doing just fine with zero blossom end rot. You can see that some of our Skyway tomatoes have blossom end rot and some of them don't. One really important thing we do is pick all of the tomatoes showing blossom end rot and dispose of them. This allows the plant to focus energy on the healthy tomatoes, and bacteria associated with the rotting tomatoes won't spread. Even after losing what seems like quite a few tomatoes to blossom end rot, we still end up having really good harvests every year. Of course, this loss would be more devastating if we only had a couple of tomato plants, but in that case, growing varieties that are less affected by blossom end rot would be really helpful. So, picking tomato varieties that grow successfully in your area helps overall. Doing research to find these varieties and then some trial and error take time, but it's well worth it in the long run. We start our tomato plants from seed indoors and then plant them outside in the garden beds. This is for another video, but we'll just say that it gives our tomato plants a really good healthy head start and allows us more flexibility in terms of deciding which varieties to plant. We also work really hard to keep our soil very healthy by always adding compost and planting cover crops, so we never really use fertilizer, except for maybe fish emulsion sometimes, usually just when we plant our seedlings. So keeping the soil healthy and providing consistent, efficient moisture to the plants is key. We hope that some or all of these tips will help you find out what works for you while growing tomatoes.